Hello and welcome to the Leadership Lab, the podcast where we dissect life science success stories. I'm your host, Morris, and I'm thrilled to bring you conversations with industry visionaries in the life science space who will discuss their successes, failures, challenges, and also the leaders who inspired them. Hello and welcome to the Leadership Lab. Today in the studio I have with me Daniel J. Muller. He is a professor at the ETH, but that's not all. He's the founder of multiple institutes and a startup and is currently collaborating with Roche on basically building fit-for-purpose students entering the pharmaceutical industry. Daniel, that was a mouthful. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Morris. Happy to be here.
So usually how we like to get started is with where you're from. Where were you born?
Oh, I've been born in Germany, in a very old medieval town, Bad Wimpfen, which they have a few towers from 1300 or something like that, and a hospital. And I've been born there. But then shortly afterwards, I grew up in Paris, in Brussels. And I went to school went to a French kindergarten, and then I went to international school. I grew up in an American neighborhood in Belgium. And then in the 70s, 72, I remember we went back. That was the Soccer World Championship. And we went back to Germany. Yeah.
Okay. What brought you guys around to these locations?
My
father's work or my mother's work?
Father's work.
Father's work.
Father's work, yeah.
Okay. What did he do, if I could ask?
He was working in the NATO. It was built up.
So it was probably new, yeah, right? Because they started in the late 40s or early 50s?
Late 40s, 50s, and he was working in the headquarters at NATO, and then later in the diplomatic corps.
Okay.
So, and I've been the child following.
Okay, all right. And so you got back 72, or you came back, that was back to Germany?
Germany, Heidelberg.
Okay. To Heidelberg. And you were... How old at that time? I don't want to age you or anything like that, but was that just
It was
school
7.
Age? 7, okay. And what were you like? I mean, if we consider 7 onwards in school, I mean, you obviously have a great scientific mind, but were you always interested in science?
No.
Okay.
Let's see. The first thing was the cultural shock. Coming from American neighborhood, growing up in an American neighborhood in a French-speaking part of Belgium. Germany was, in the 1920s, was about, let's say, society was 10, 20 years beyond the American one in thinking. And I've been a boy with very black hair, and I looked and blue eyes, and it was not normal at that time to have such strong phenotypes, you would say, as a biologist. Yeah. And I've been always treated as a foreigner, and that was very narrow for me, the thinking in the school. So I didn't feel happy at all.
That was back in Germany or still in
That was
Belgium?
Back in Germany.
Okay.
In American society, everyone was integrated. Everyone was taken as a full human, even as a little child. It was very nice. And then you come back to this 20 years back society in Germany, and that was creating quite some problems and friction.
Okay. I mean, I moved from Ireland to Canada when I was young, and I got in a lot of fights because I was a bit different or whatever. I'm not sure. Was that similar? I mean...
I assume it must have been somehow similar.
Okay.
Yeah. That was quite... Yeah, it was a very important time for me, I must say, because I had to, as a very young child, I had to find a place in a society which I didn't feel I belonged to at that time.
So how do you do that?
Well, the first thing is I developed asthma. Symptoms, very, very clear. That was, of course. And then I started to do fishing like crazy, to go out to the rivers, fishing, and started yoga, which was very crazy at that time too, because 1970s no one did yoga. Yeah, with 8. I started yoga.
Okay.
So everything what I could do alone, I started, and I withdraw from school. I didn't want to go to school. It was for me like a cage, like narrowing me down from personality-wise and developmental-wise. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That was the asthma issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there was a very important advice coming from a friend of my parent. That was she was a woman, a doctor, and she said, Daniel, at school, if you have problems, don't worry. You have to be only in one subject. You have to be the best. And they ignore that you're not so good in the other ones. So if you're good in one subject, they leave you alone with all the other stuff and you have some freedom. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. And so I started to do lots of mathematics and physics because it was the less input for me to achieve something.
Okay.
And that was a very good advice because in all other subjects I didn't have to do a lot, and I had gained some freedom.
Okay.
And that asthma disappeared, and yoga went better.
Okay. How about the fishing?
Fishing, yeah.
Catch any good ones? I mean,
yeah, fish. Yeah, it was a wonderful time. Fishing gave me always some time to think about everything. Yeah.
I was obsessed from like 11 to 14. I used to watch fishing shows. I bought all the stuff. And now I see my son, like I was just with him on the weekend going to the tackle shop, and he got all this advice from the guy telling him, oh, you live there, you can't fish with this, you got to fish with that. And he's so into it. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of watch it repeat itself. Why math and physics for you were less input?
Well, I felt for example, in physics, you only had to understand some formulas, and then you could combine them, and you could explain all the phenomena at that time, at least. Yeah. That was for me very logic. Possibly, I had really some gifts for physics and mathematics.
Well, I think maybe yes. Yeah, I always liked it because if I wrote an English paper, they could give me a C, and I couldn't understand why. And it was so subjective. But a math test was, look, it's right. You can't tell me one way or the other. I did it right. And so I liked them for that reason. Like it was just...
Exactly. That's the same also what happened to me.
It's pure, exactly true. There's a right and a wrong. And it's just, that's not subjective.
Yeah. And I felt very subjective in for example, German. You had to write I don't know, an Aufsatz. What is an Aufsatz? It's... a small chapter on some topic, and I found it very subjective that they gave me a C or whatever. They didn't like what I've been writing. I've been so convinced what I wrote is incredibly creative and everything. And in physics, there was no way to say it's wrong if it is right. Okay. There was not so much room for interpretation. Yeah.
So then you moved through high school, I guess. Was that more of the same? It was just physics, math, fishing, and yoga? Or was there more things in life at that stage?
Yes, there was a second wonderful story I had in my life. Well, many stories in my life where I had people influencing me. And first, I've been very curious as a young boy to meet people and to see how they think and what they are concerned in their world, and to learn from that. And at that time, my father, after being at Brussels at NATO, he built up as an administrator the European Molecular Biological Laboratorium in Heidelberg. And there was a scientist working there on the vitrification of ice, of water, was Jacques Dubouchet.
What of water?
Vitrification of water. That means water, if you freeze it, normally crystallizes. Yeah. And he wanted to freeze the water without crystallization to preserve the structure of biological specimens for electron microscopy.
Okay.
And he actually received the Nobel Prize 2017 for this work he did at the EMBL.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, in the 70s. And I've been there as the children of the employees, they could go to the EMBL, to the dark chamber, to develop some pictures like photographs. Yeah. I did black-white photographs. And I've been in the dark chamber, and sometimes Jacques came to the dark chamber and said, oh, Daniel, you're here again. Let me see what you pictured. And he developed his picture from the vitrified ice, and I had that, and he talked about his genuine interest of freezing ice so it doesn't crystallize. You think as a 12, 14-year-old boy, you think there's a scientist talking about that. And I found it fascinating. I never understood it, really, why he wants to do it at that time. And we talked about photographing and something like that. And then he talked to me about molecular machines, what they are, like the machines of the cell. He wants to image them with the vitrified ice. And I found that quite interesting. And I took it up, this topic, machines, And I interpreted it in a very different way. I bought a motorbike, which was at that time 30 years old. Now it's about 70 years old.
You still have it?
I still have it.
Oh, wow, okay.
I still have it. 30 years old. It was rotten. I built it up myself, the machine, and Jacques helped me sometimes, looked at the machine, what was wrong, and I visited him, and I'm at home, and then I looked how he lives, and he had young children, and he lived in the countryside, and he had a Kinderwagen, which he got from the neighbors, but the Kinderwagen had only 3 wheels. And he didn't care. He said, okay, I take that one, I don't buy a new one, and I just find another wheel. So he had 3 wheels and one very unequal wheel on the Kindergarten. And he walked through this incredible small town where everyone knowed everyone, and Jacques was very freaky, thinking about vitrified eyes and not so much about what people think about him, and he followed his path. And I think what he taught me is that you should follow your genuine interest and not so much think about others if it's these things like how you dress, whether your Kinderwagen has 3 or 4 wheels or unequal wheels. At that time it was different because in the 70s, 80s, people thought a lot about that you have to make a bella figura, that you have to look good, you have to integrate very well in the society. And he taught me, go for your genius interest and don't bother so much to what people think, in the superficial things. Yeah.
And that influenced you then with the path you took afterwards? I mean,
well, as a young person, you always look into the society and you try to find reference points because you have to position yourself. So you're not completely independent of it. But I think I learned to distinguish first. There are important issues and less important issues which I should not take care about. And that's about, this is a very personal measure which you apply. Kinderwagen is not so important. 3, 4 wheels, don't care about how somebody looks, how somebody dress is not so important. It's more what the message the people carry. And you can learn from these messages. Everyone has a little bit of wisdom. And if you try to understand the person opposite to you, you learn a little bit better to understand the world our surrounding.
Yeah, but we don't, unfortunately. I mean, most people see you look one particular way and then, okay, that's not a person worth talking to.
That's true.
I think there's 2 ways to look at that. And, if I would be giving guidance to people like going for what we do is job interviews, I tell them, just dress better than you normally would. It's okay when you get the job, you can kind of show up and do what you want, but the medium is the message, right, as they say. And if you're the medium and you look a certain way, it's unfortunate. But most people, 99% of people are going to put a snap judgment on you right away. But I also agree with the fact that I think career choice in the past was much more driven by society's parents. I mean, even my own would have wanted me, you've got to go to university, you have to study. And I think even myself now, that's how I started out thinking about my own kids. But now I'm like, you know what? If you're going to be whatever you want to be a carpenter or you want to be a scientist, just be the best one and just pick something that you really love.
Exactly.
So what did you pick?
Well, that's actually what you said is very true, that you have to find out what you love, what you want to do. It's very difficult as a young person too, because there are so many possibilities. So I wanted to study architecture. I wanted to be a forester. I wanted to be a fisherman. I wanted to be a medical doctor to travel around the world to help everyone. Then I wanted to be a philosopher, and then I studied physics and philosophy. So it was at the end, and because I thought it's the easiest again, I went to Berlin to drive taxi to earn my money, because at that time I didn't want to have any cent from my father. I thought I'd do my own life. I want to do it just the way I want to do. And that was an exciting time.
What age were you then?
20.
And that was Berlin in the
Berlin,
early
85.
80s. Okay,
85.
Cool.
That wall down.
That must have been definitely
walled
an interesting
city,
time.
Walled city,
up, but then,
unbelievable.
Were you still there when it came down?
Sure. I've been still there. Well, it took me longer to study because I've been driving taxi, and actually I did not only drive taxi, I also enjoyed the life. Berlin was a very hot city at that time. And
even still.
Yeah, it is still.
Or a bit of a renaissance, let's say. Okay. All right. So you're driving taxi, you're attending university in Berlin, and you were studying physics and philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was a master's program, I guess.
Well, at that time, yeah, it was master's. At that time, it was only diploma.
Okay.
This was a German diploma, which is equal to master.
Yeah. Then, I mean, that's one thing we hear a lot as well from people who are studying, and maybe they're completed the master's, and there's always the question, should I do the PhD? What made you choose, and is there advice you would give to people who are at that crossroads?
Genuine interest, whether you will feel. During my master, when I did my master thesis, it was the first time I really did my research myself. I had my problem, a very reductionistic problem, and I tried to focus on that and find out how neutrons flip in the magnetic field. I don't know why this is of interest anymore, but it was quite interesting for me as a physicist to think in these abstract themes, and I loved it. And I loved it very much. I thought, oh, that's fun, and I've been quite successful already in my master thesis. I did 5 publications, which is absolutely unusual. And then I thought, okay, if it's so much fun, why don't I continue and do a PhD? That was it. It was not for the career so much. I didn't think about that. I thought about just how far can I get? How far can I reach in the academic world, or from how good can I get from education?
Okay.
Yeah, it was more the intellectual challenge.
I didn't know that neutrons flip. I thought they have no charge and they just kind of stay.
They have spins. They have spin
yeah, they
up
have a spin
or
up or down.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Genuine passion, moving towards the PhD, wanting to see how far you could go. What was your PhD thesis?
Well, the first thing I wanted to do a very own PhD, something after the master I said no more spin flipping neutrons. I want to do something which is more important for life or for society, and that's biophysics.
Right.
So there was a new microscope developed, and it was atomic force microscope, and I thought I want to develop this microscope. It could image individual atoms, this microscope, and I wanted to develop it towards imaging biological samples at an unprecedented resolution. It was not done now, so I went to some professors in Berlin and I convinced them to finance me. And when they said, yes, we will finance you for the project, I said, yes, but I won't do the project with you. I will do it in another university in Switzerland because they have the best instrumentation. But you will be I will take you, of course, I will...
You put your name on it.
Put your name on it.
Okay.
And I found somebody who said, yes, I'll do it. And so I had a stipend organized by a very unconventional way. And I went here to the Biocenter in Basel to a group from Andreas Engel. And then I started my PhD. And again, I had incredible luck and success and a very good supervisor. And I think it was about 40 papers came out in the PhD. It's unusual, incredibly productive. But we had a chain. This microscope was just working. We could establish it, and then we hammered one problem after the other.
Okay.
It was a real wild academic time. And also life was wild at that time, yeah. In Switzerland in the 90s.
Why?
Yeah. Well, just in Basel, we had wonderful clubs to go out. So sometimes I went after the work to the club, and then from the club directly to the microscope again, slept in the microscope room, which was dark. In a Faraday cave, you had no distortion at all. You could sleep 2-3 hours power nap, and then you continue to image your biological samples and to watch how machines of the cell work and function. So there we are back to the machines, which I talked to you at the beginning.
Okay. I want to go back to something, a word you just used was luck.
Mm.
Do you really think so?
I think it was, possibly I had a good nose, but you can say it always, I could have also failed. So I had failed, and I knew there's risk and I can fail. And I always thought, okay, if I fail, what would I do? And the simplest thing was always, I would sell French fries at the Riviera. which was absolutely abstract. And
in Vienna?
At the Riviera.
Ah, okay.
At the Riviera, because I thought I loved South France. I loved France anyway. And at the Riviera, I loved the summer atmosphere. And French fry selling is a stinky job. You may not like it very much, but the illusion was you would be there where you could survive. That's it. So it was just a fallback situation. It's strange that you have such. But that I told everyone, if it doesn't work, I sell French fries. I don't know what I would have done instead, but it was a simple.
I think it was a security thing. I had a job in a restaurant when I was maybe 17. And I remember I thought, if all else fails, I can flip burgers. Like, I know how to do this. And I mean, it's not great money, but I could rent a place and survive. I mean, I don't know if that's the case today. But that was always like, okay, I'm capable of this. And everything else I can build on top and see where it goes. So there was less risk. I didn't think of it as a risk then to go and do something else, which was maybe a little more risky because you can always go back. But going from what you were doing to selling French fries, I think is quite the jump. And maybe the world is better off that you did continue in this vein. And you did so well that ultimately you graduated with the best PhD thesis of your class in Basel. So, I mean, when I was reading about that, I thought, okay, that's a pretty good start. But then you finish. And I mean, that's normally a huge amount of work. There's a defense. You got to, I'm sure you were fairly confident that you were going to do okay. But then a lot of times we hear from people is, I've finished. And then they're like, oh, well, I got this offer to do a post-grad. And, I talked to some of those people 15 years later, and they're still doing that, but they haven't really. And they made the decision. Then they'll call me after 15 years, say, I want to go to industry. And be like, okay, well, that's going to be a little tougher. Mm-hmm. What was your thought process when you finished academia versus the more entrepreneurial approach you've kind of taken? How did you think about that?
Well, the first thing after PhD, I think I already had offers to go for postdoc or even already for group leader at that time because it was so successful. But then I took an old car from my father. He had a Morgan, and I took this Morgan with a sleeping bag, and I drove through South Europe and took some weeks off with the old Roadster. And then I took my time just to think about what to do. And I came back and I said, okay, I want to continue in academics. I want to go for academic career. And then I got very quickly, I did a habilitation in Basel. I think it was one of the fastest habilitations in University Basel. And then I became a Max Planck group leader in Dresden, where they have built up a Max Planck Institute with a very new concept. And the concept was that there are no big groups for the directors anymore, but many young groups which are independent and get their own money and could do their own follow their own genuine research interests. And I like this concept very much, to break a little bit to try to break this rather rigid framework of existing research institutions in Europe at that time, that the professor is the big boss, and he dictates or she dictates everything what is going on beyond her hierarchical position.
Right. And so that could lead to stagnation, I guess. I mean, if somebody's 20 years, after their PhD, and they're still thinking in the same way and dictating downwards.
Absolutely. And there's so many people then stuck in the career path, and they're frustrated, and so many good talents are lost on that in such a construct. And
then what were you doing when you were at Max Planck?
I did. The first thing, I had another very good mentor, which was Kai Simons. He was the founding director of the Max Planck Institute, and he was a guy with strong visions for society and how we could do something for society, and he could convince or talk with many people about his ideas and bring them behind an idea or develop the ideas with these people together. And he built up he taught me the power of the collective. And, until then, the scientists were thought to be, you have a group, you sit in your room, you do something genius like Jacques Dubochet did with his vitrified ice, or and you do it for yourself, and possibly you have a research group. You do this research group with your 10, 20, 30 people, and then you do your research. And Kai taught me, no, you can go for much bigger ideas, much bigger initiatives if you bring people together, and all people push in the same direction, and this creates a collective momentum which is way beyond individual groups can have.
Right.
And so that was what I've been taught by Kai, and I liked in Dresden. I've been there for 8 years, and the first thing is I built up the biotechnology center, which now became an excellence center in Dresden. A huge thing. I've been one of the founding director of it. And after 6 years after establishing this biotech center, then I established the Center for Biomolecular Engineering, it's BCube. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yes, and then this means that I got the money with some colleagues together, and they developed the initiative or the concept. And then the first thing was, I will never do it myself. This should be done by young people which fill the position and create this institute or shape this institute or lead this institute for the next 50, 60 years. Because I had already envisioned I want to do more than that.
Okay. Two things. When you talk about the power of the collective, did you approach that from kind of a multidisciplinary perspective? So you didn't just have a bunch of physicists or a bunch of molecular biologists. It was a cross-functional group. Was that the thinking? Okay.
It was this kind of bigger thinking that you thought about what are the big themes which are needed in society, and how can we address it? Whom do we need to address it? And I recognized very quickly in Dresden we developed a concept which is called molecular bioengineering, where we use the molecular machines of the cell and build them together and make these machines to engineer these machines to go into biotechnology or medical applications. And I very quickly recognized that there's one strong weakness in Dresden. This is the industry. We don't have the industry.
Right.
And they've been Kai at that time. He possibly did one. He saw it, and we've been in one topic very ignorant. We thought the industry would come if we are good enough. And I think that was too much positive thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads to the second thing. You mentioned now twice, once getting the PhD funded, and again with BCube, getting the money. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably going to come up a few more times. So I want to address it now. Either as a student or anybody writing a grant proposal or anybody trying to fund their startup, usually outside investment, I mean, unless you're bootstrapping, is absolutely necessary, and especially in the scientific field because the startup costs are so high. Mm-hmm. What is your approach to getting the money? I mean, there's probably a formula that works for you, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear how that works.
There was never one straight line. I always had to look where it was. First, we started from conceptual thinking. Now it's much improved. What I learned in Dresden, actually afterwards I moved to Basel, to the ETH Zurich, to build up in Basel a new department with my colleagues to strengthen the academic relations and industrial relations in Basel. And that was the perfect location to go for. And what I learned is first think about the ecosystem, the larger ecosystem of a country, then, or if Europe, country and city where you are, and what makes the place where you are most unique. And then you think how you can contribute to make this place even bigger and greater. Yeah. So in Basel, it's very clear, it's a very strong life science. Good. That's very generic. Life sciences everywhere in Europe. But what is not generic is it's the largest life science hub and biotech hub and pharma hub in Europe. We can compete with London. We can compete with the biggest cities in Europe with that. It's unbelievable what Basel has to build. Then we thought, how could we contribute to that? That's for example, that's an idea. And then everything flows. You build up a concept. how you can shape this area and make this area stronger for the next 10, 20 years. You think into the future, what is needed. You talk with all stakeholders, and then once you have a very good concept, then you look for the money. This is how I did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to stray off the timeline a little bit, to kind of, we're talking about leadership today, and as you say, Switzerland, Basel especially, is one of the premier R&D or biotech hubs in Europe or the world. Why do you think they got to that place? And what do you think has to be done for it to remain so? How do we stay ahead in such a competitive market? How do we lead the world in terms of the research that gets done here?
Well, Basel has a very, I think it's since it's on the border to Germany and France and directly on the border, it has possibly a very good system to attract people from 3 countries to experts to work at the biotech in Basel. This might be one, but historically, it's because Basel there was a very strong silk coloring, and its chemistry was very strong, and out of that, then the biotech and pharma companies have been built with a very good foresight, and it's actually, if you see it, it's unbelievable that Basel, since 120 or more years, is in the front of this discipline, chemistry, and now pharmacology. And normally you see always a dip that the region after 20, 50 years doesn't doesn't manage to get to go into the next generation.
To continue innovating.
Yeah.
Why do you think that Basel has that, though? Any thoughts there? I mean, your guess is as good as mine, but
I think possibly it's a critical consortium of people which are there, which make the right decisions, including also the city of Basel, which is very much oriented towards industry and looks what industry needs and to keep them. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You also ask what is needed to make it better, and this is one thing. I don't have 20 lives; I only have one, and I possibly don't reach that anymore. But what I think is in academics, what academics can contribute for that, I see possibly 95 or 90% of our students, they don't stay in academia, they go to industry. Yeah. And they're very highly searched and they're very well taken. But if you look for pharma, for example, what they need in terms of experts, they recruit internationally. And they recruit often the experts at prices in buying up know-how by companies, for example, if it's for example, a gene therapy company, they more 10 times, 100 times more the value than the company has. And why do they do that? Is because they buy in the knowledge.
Yeah.
That means they buy in the knowledge of the employees and of the company. And it teaches us that we don't now educate the students with exactly the knowledge the pharma could need. So I'm dreaming of that we educate the next generation of experts for pharma very closely together with pharma together. So they teach, we have a much better common understanding of what can be done and what is needed, so that the students and the PhD students, if they leave the academics, that they are right away prepared to shape the next generation of what is needed in the pharma. And I think this would make.
Do you think they know?
I talked with leadership in pharma. They like the idea very much. Now we are trying to shape that in Basel and to make this a unique place, because it's not done in Harvard, it's not done in London, it's not done anywhere. That is really that we train, for example, the next generation of gene-based, cell-based, organoid-based engineers for developing new therapies, which are very good in biomedical data sciences. These are the 4 disciplines you need for the next generation of biotech and pharma, and a very good understanding of medicine and industry at the same time. So this new generation will be, I think this can bring Basel and Switzerland to a leadership in the field. But this brings me to another point, is that in Switzerland is rather small.
Yeah.
We have 8 million people or 9 million people.
Almost 9.
Possibly we'll get 10.
It depends on who's in charge, I guess.
Exactly. But, we have so many universities and there's so much redundancy in these universities. Sometimes redundancy is good, but sometimes it also slows down development. So now, as we do in Basel, to develop a unique profile for the location to make Basel stronger, every city in Switzerland has a unique location and a unique strengths. And possibly it's time that the universities don't look so much for redundancy, but take their chance to build up unique profiles. And these profiles can be dynamically adapted, but they bring them international visibility and also increase the strengths, increase the industrial or economic power. And in Switzerland, this is the capital we have, that we can educate the next generation of academics in very specified topics which is needed by the industry to keep them here and even to make them more powerful.
Yeah, fit for purpose, let's
Yes.
say. Okay. All right, to go back to your journey. So Dresden, Max Planck, then you end up back in Basel. Was that right?
Yes.
So how'd that happen, actually?
It was luck and also wanted. I wanted my wife is my
You
partner.
just want to come back for the clubs.
My partner is from Milan. Okay. My parents stayed in Heidelberg, so I thought, okay, in Switzerland, I loved the time in Switzerland, and I knew ETH is a fantastic place. So I wrote to the president whether he has some position free, and they thought, okay, who is this guy writing me for position? But they then said, well, they search for some professorship in Basel. Why don't you apply there? And then I applied, and I learned about the ecosystem, the new department they tried to build up, and so I applied and got a position, and I came here, and then I started over again, and we built the first national competence center afterwards in molecular systems engineering, and then the Bortner Center for Child Health, and now it is, and so on. Yeah.
Okay. One thing I think we kind of skipped over was Nambition.
Nambition. Oh yeah.
What was that, first off? I think we're talking about the machines again.
Yeah. I built it in. It was a company, one of the largest nanotech companies in Germany at that time. The largest spin-off companies in nanotech. And what we built is a robot which takes individual machines of the cell and characterizes them. So it was a fancy instrument. It could pick molecules from the cell, put them on a hook, and then it could sense how these proteins of the cell would interact with the environment. And that was, so you could learn, if you add a drug, for example, how it would change, how proteins interact with each other and fulfill functions in the cell and so on. And we built a company to build this robot, and as soon as it was...
It's like GPCR or...
GPCRs,
would be an
ion channels, DNA, RNA, everything you could take, and fully automated. You basically load the machine, it changes samples, buffers, or records the data, millions of single molecules, analyzes, and then sends you always an update on a mobile phone. And that was already in the year 2004 to 6. We developed it, went very fast. And then we had another financing round, and then we said, okay, we sell it. So I sold the company.
So you sold the company
successfully to Bruker now.
I think it's Bruker now. Yeah, I had a look, and I saw it was previously something else, JRK or
JPK. In Berlin,
JPK. Yeah, exactly. I don't know them, but I think then Bruker took that over ultimately. So okay. So you're back at ETH. Is this the time of the BSSE?
Yes.
Okay. Please explain what that is, because I think our biotech, especially the Swiss biotech listeners, are going to be pretty interested into kind of what's come out of that as well. So what is it?
The DBSSE is a department of the ETH Zurich has largely independent departments, 16 largely independent departments, and one department is the Department of Biosystems Science and Engineering, and that's located in Basel. And that has been located in Basel to build up academic and industrial relationships in Basel because of its unique strengths. So what we do is molecular and cellular systems engineering. So we engineer molecular systems and cellular systems to apply them biotechnologically or medically. And for example, for vision restoration, so we work on making blind people.
That's what we talked about the first time we met.
Yeah. So we work on vision restoration with local heroes like Boton Droska, who was the first person treating blind people to make them seeing again. That was done 5 years ago. Or we work with Roche to develop new therapies and for macular degeneration, which is one of the major diseases approaching us in not only in Asia. It's a major endemic coming with the macular degeneration, but also here. Yeah.
Okay. Is that genotype or is that gene related or is it environmental?
It's possibly also gene related, but it's also related on the screen time that people spend. And so 80% of the young people in Asia, they have strong myopia, which means they are short-sighted, very strong. And if you have a strong myopia, what happens? The eye is deformed, and this mechanical deformation of the eye leads to a 1,000-fold increase of retina detachment of the eye.
So that's the screens.
That's a screen, and that's crazy. What's going on?
God. Okay, so 20 years down the line, we're all blind.
Well, there have a very much increased probability to get severe eye diseases. Yeah, and also surgery doesn't. So surgery doesn't help you from most people exchange the lens if they have a dioptry of -7 or 8, because the eye will be still deformed.
Yeah,
and this mechanical deformation will still promote detachment of retina and macular degeneration. Degeneration.
Okay. So, I mean, I try to read up on health news and I listen to my health podcast. Why is nobody talking about that? I mean, they talk about the mental effects of too much screen time and, the depression, the anxiety, all these things we hear about all the time, but I've never heard anything about our eyes.
I don't know, but it's also you can look at the statistics in Africa, for example. They have less myopia, because people have not so much screen time, and they're more also have more physical movement and more outside. This is the interpretation at the moment. Right, okay. But the strongest myopia you have at the moment in Asia, and then in European and American countries. So that comes towards us. So our children or ourselves, possibly we need strong glasses. And increasingly strong glasses.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I've had these since I was 6, so I'm okay with it. But back to the BSSE, there's been quite a few spin-offs. Is it like 30? How many? 30 spin-offs. Any you care to name as kind of highlights?
There were possibly. Well, there are 3 spin-offs have been sold. Well, they are fantastic spin-offs, and almost
so which ones are those?
And only one failed out of 30 since we are there. So all the other 29 are still in charge, or 3 of them have been bought up by enormous, very good.
Which 3 were those?
That was a kind of a Zurich Instruments. There was Andreas Hillemann involvement. And then there was 2 other ones, names I don't recall. That's one from Cy Reddy and one from Sven Panke. They sold it 2 years ago or 3 years ago very well. And
so it's quite the machine in terms of incubation, spin-off, ultimately funding, and then acquisition.
Yeah, so we are very active on that in our department because we are application-oriented, and it's possibly also the environment in Basel, which is very inspiring, and also the support of the ETH Zurich, which is very, very good in terms of spin out your own company.
Yeah. What about collaboration with respect? I mean, obviously we have to talk a little bit about AI. I mean, that's kind of, and I'm always trying to get people's take on that, because I know that the ETH, especially in Zurich, is really, really strong in this area when it comes to, I don't know what you want to say, computers. And the ultimate digital health spin-offs that we're going to see coming out of all this kind of ecosystem that we have here in Zurich. Do you have much involvement there? Is there much collaboration across, let's say, what we would call the typical biological sciences and their link to computers?
Oh yes, there's this, our department has 1/3 of our professors are theoreticians or AI-based professors, AI in medicine and biomedical research, and they are linked also to the AI center of the ETH Zurich.
Okay.
And now, since this increase, there's an increasing demand of applying AI in medicine and biomedical applications. There is now the idea from the ETH to build up an AI in medicine hub in Basel, because steered in Basel, because for the entire ETH, because Basel is the prime hub of pharma companies. They have the most of the data, and but it's of course inclusive for all people from Switzerland to participate. Yeah, so there will be another AI hub built up soon, and and being of very much importance for Switzerland and Europe, hopefully.
Okay, good. I don't want to gloss over anything else, but I have a couple of other things that you were involved in. One you also mentioned was the Bodmer Research Center for Child Health. What's the main focus of the mission there?
The mission is to help children in industrially low-income countries for developing therapies, particularly for those kids. So there must be cheap, very easy to apply, because often in the low-income countries, it's a difficulty to provide medical supplement, and also to teach people how to. It's an education problem also, to teach people how to take the medication every morning at 8 o'clock or something like that. And so we develop devices for monitoring health, digitalized devices for monitoring health, and also new kind of therapies to help the most common children diseases in low and middle income countries.
Okay. Yeah. And then there's the NCCR.
That's NCCR.
No, that's something else altogether?
That's something else. The NCCR.
It's hard for me to keep up here. There's a lot of acronyms. So what's that one?
Sorry for that. That's a National Competence Center in Research. It's financed by the Swiss National Science Foundation.
Yep.
And that's molecular systems engineering. That's running now since 10 years. And there we will develop we bring molecular machines, for example, of the cells together, different ones. We engineer them, that they together work like factories. And these factories can do more than the individual machines. Like you build up an engine, like a car, you know. If you only have the wheel, you cannot do as much as you have the engine, the steering wheel, and whatever, and the wheels. And that's the same. So we build up small units, autonomous units. They can be encapsulated. For example, you can remotely control these. These are nano factories, so very small factories. You can remotely control them to produce insulin, for example. You encapsulate them in the body, and you remotely switch by a smartwatch. It measures insulin concentration of the body, and then it controls the production of insulin in the body. And
so no more injections.
No more injections, and it's for diabetes.
And is that working?
In mice.
Okay.
It works in mice already, not in human. Yeah. We are not in human now. To go into human needs.
I mean, that's a big big application.
Exactly.
Okay. How do you find the time? I mean, that's one thing that, you know, there's so many things you're involved with, and you mentioned a partner as well. Yeah. What's your philosophy in terms of how you, as a founder, as a director of all of these institutes, it's got to be hard to keep on top. I mean, what's your philosophy around leadership when it comes to having, you know, you're like Elon Musk or something. I mean, let's not go as far, but like, you know, he's got fingers in a bunch of pies, and you're the same. I don't see you in political office at this stage, but how do you manage?
The first, I must say, I never felt like this being stress or burden. It's always big fun because what I'm doing is mainly I'm representing the faculty which we have at our department, and that's an outstanding faculty. I look at every faculty member, and I get a smile when I look at them because they perform so outstandingly. They're unique, and I'm just a salesperson. I'm doing some research myself too, and possibly I'm participating or developing ideas or develop some ideas. But there's such a wonderful team behind me that I just have the joy to bring together their expertise into a big picture. And that makes me extremely happy. And so I think the same now, for example, for the Bodnar Research Center for Child Health, which is now called Basel Research Center for Child Health, because in the meantime, we could attract, or our faculty could attract another 1 billion donation for the Bodnar Center of Immunoengineering in Basel. So there's another one it's coming now. And
$1 billion.
1 billion.
Just
one of the largest donations in Switzerland or Europe for for independent research institution.
One source.
Is
that
private.
public?
It's public. It went public at the beginning of this year.
So who was that?
Bodnar.
Foundation
Bodnar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if we do such like the NCCR molecular systems engineering, there are 30 PIs involved from Basel and all over Switzerland.
What's a PI? So for the
PIs, principal investigators, these are professors,
Yeah.
and from research institutions. And we could hire 3 new professors. And I think based on the concept, which was very innovative, we got applicants which were so outstanding that the most important thing was for me to get young, fantastic people, which I knew we have been convinced that they would increase our collective power in Basel and to go for the next step.
Back to the collective piece again.
Exactly.
Okay.
So NCCR we got 3 fantastic young people, young professors. Every one of them got 1 or 2 ERC grants. It's unbelievable. Publishing like crazy, doing spin-off companies. Based on that, we could get the Bodnar Research Center for Child Health, another 6 professors, and we are just hiring now fantastic people we got now coming, we could get coming. Based on that, we could get the next one. And it's just building up structures and to attract the best possible people and put them into the leadership.
Okay.
Yes. And
now you're very near and dear to my heart. So as you said, I've asked, how do you manage? And you basically told me, it's my teams. I've just got incredible teams. What's your philosophy around hiring? What do you look for? I mean, I've got usually 3 key attributes that I'm looking for when I'm hiring people. Do you have a system?
Well, the first, I don't know whether, there's no ranking. Let's see it that way. From academic point, they must be absolute excellent. And we must be convinced that these guys can shape their area for the next 20 years and they make a punch. So we don't need followers, we need leaders.
So
smart people. Yeah. And then we look for whether they are good, they would be good from a personal point of view, whether they fit and could in the culture. Could they fit into such missions which we develop and collective missions which we develop, like could they integrate and contribute to that, you know? And that doesn't mean that they have to do administrative work or something like that. It's that we get this added value for our department out of it to build the next one. We want to build up an ecosystem in Basel, a strong ecosystem. And yes, that's basically, these are possibly the first 2. Yeah.
Okay.
And whether they are ready to take leadership at some point, but you don't want to overload them too much at the beginning.
And drive? I mean, it's one thing that I look for a lot is drive in people. Both when we hire for clients, we hire for ourselves. But I think that comes from the love of what you're doing, right?
Yeah, this is the drive is including already in the first. You know, if you're convinced to can take leadership in what they're doing academically or in the medical application, whatever they target from a scientific point of view, This includes they have their drive. You don't have to. And then what you do, I'm now older statements, you get everything out of their field that they can get as fast and good as possible. The first thing we do. In the first years of building up these people, we get them as good as they can get. And that we think, okay, this would be potentially the next candidate for a big prize and for a big contribution in Basel or Switzerland International. Yeah.
So many successes. What about failures? What was one that really stands out for you? Or you can call it a learning if you want, but we all know the ones where we're like, damn it, I did the wrong thing.
It's hard to think because I think the day is 90% failure and 10% success. But whenever you have a failure, you try to learn of it and you try to find an alternative way to find or to develop, to rethink and develop a better way to get where you go. Because if I fail, for example, or it tells me also that there was something not good working, and I'm analyzing the situation. I try, okay, how can I get this situation now better and working? So I don't consider it too much as failure. But a big failure, what was it?
Well, or if you had it to do again, you would have done it differently. That usually helps me frame it.
Well, I must say, I would have gone possibly to industry. I would have tried it there, because I think when I go, for example, I'm a big fan of the local industries in Basel. If I go to one of these leading industries like Roche, and I go there and I see how they try to think how to improve the working environment and make it better to get people to really accelerate and integrate them better into multidisciplinary, complicated tasks they do. I find that very interesting. Okay. And so far, always the universities claim to do that. But if you go to these pharma companies, sometimes you think, wow, they take, in some cases, they take leadership towards shaping and working environment and thinking about how can I even get it more attractive. Possibly it's also a money-wise issue that you need enough money to do it. And but I found that super interesting, and you see, I also try to develop that in this direction in the academics. What has to be done in academics? That we have to build collective powers. We have to think new ways. We have to think about how we can contribute to the society. They are the big goals in the society. And basically also, how can we really make an impact in our lifespan and not in 100 or 250 years?
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing research in both academia and then in industry, and realizing the differences in those labs and the way I had to use equipment and some disposable things that I didn't dispose of right away because I had to use them again. But I think that there's, with sufficient funding in academia, you've kind of got a freedom to do what you want. But in pharma, there's downstream things to think about. Like we could develop the greatest therapy, but if our competition's 3 years ahead, you're just going to hear, stop.
Yes,
we're already dead in the water. Let's not even try. And that can be, I think, that's one source of frustration I hear from researchers in the industry. But then from anybody I talk to in academia, it's like having a final impact. Because normally we've got the idea, we take it to a certain point, and then somebody else kind of grabs it or buys it or licenses it from us. And then they're the ones who actually bring it to the patients. And that's the one thing I hear often is like, I'd love to be the one who finally brings this out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are two other issues on that. One is of course bringing it, the big thing to bring, I think, to contribute something to society, to make it better. And of course, you can be scooped as well as a scientist, in the academics. Somebody is faster and publish your paper, and that's it. And that's the same in pharma. You just have to understand this happens, and there are some reasons to stop a project. So you work on the next one. But if you see also the greatest artists, some of the greatest artists in the past for some 100 years, like Da Vinci, or they were not hired to paint something. They had a mission. by the guy paying him to paint. And they had to think, how can I translate it in something beautiful, something wonderful? And the greatest art came just from that. And I think the same can be done also in science, that you think, what are the big problems out there? And how can I turn or bring in my creativity to do something outstanding? And I think we should not under-evaluate this power.
To go back to not mistakes necessarily, but to think about what was the hardest time in your career? I mean, I know you said it's all fun and it's been great, but there's got to be some times when you're shaking your head and thinking, oh man,
do I get further?
What am I doing this for?
Well, it was actually really the studying at the university, because it was so anonymous at that time in Berlin University, huge university, driving taxi, being in clubs, just doing very different ways of living, and you never knew where you would end up at some point.
So that was uncertainty.
Very, very, very important for me for orientation, and seeing the city, which was in an isolated spot in the Cold War, and that was something where I think nowadays you possibly cannot imagine how it was. It was a fantastic, creative time. We always listened to David Bowie, who was there at the same time, wonderful music, the Berlin music, I call that. And then we tried to live through this world where we didn't see that there's a way out of it, this Cold War and isolation. But then it developed. It came. Yeah.
Okay.
So possibly that was a difficult time, and later on, it became easier the more I found also my path.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're definitely more comfortable in your skin in my experience in my 40s than I was in my 20s for sure. But with that comes new challenges, right? You know who you are, but then all of a sudden you get something out of left field that you totally didn't expect. So I think there's definitely lifelong learning and advice. I mean, you talked a lot about good advice or mentorship that you got. Was there anything bad advice that sticks out?
Possibly I've been blending the bad advice right away. Just I filtered it away because
But how did you know it was bad?
I thought it just not suitable, just not right away.
But if it's some guy who's like, wow, look how good he's doing it, and he told me to do X, then I should probably do X if I want to be in that position.
That's possibly true, but I always thought I didn't want to go this way. Because I didn't want to be a scientist, just follow my own scientific path. It was possible at the beginning until I did PhD and then group leader, but then I learned, okay, you have to think more complex, more bigger, to make a real contribution. And you have to, the added value of many fantastic people is way more than what you can do. You have to think that way. This is how I think it. Now, if I would have had the chance to continue as I do as a scientist and we count in terms of breakthrough papers, some breakthrough papers after the other. But if I have the chance to build up institutes and get up fantastic people which work independent. It's not my work anymore then, but they have many more breakthrough papers. This is better for the society, and this gives me much more back than I can gain by my own scientific work.
Okay, but also no bad advice. Nothing. I mean, there's got to be a couple of gems in there.
I think what was it? Possibly. Yeah, but the bad advice is possibly would have been a good advice for somebody in a different situation. Like when I finished my PhD at the Biocenter Basel, it was quite successful, and I had offers from different institutions to go there as a postdoc. And but I thought, if I leave now here and I build up this worldwide unique device, this atomic force microscope, to watch proteins, and this is what I wanted to do, this would be lost, gone, done.
Right.
And so the advice was, go to Rockefeller, go to Harvard, go to something and follow your path. You have to go to the States.
Though.
You have to go to the States to get a path. You have to follow this normal line everyone does, PhD here and then an elite university in the States, and then you come back and then you get your position. And I thought, no, I want to do what I'm doing here. But also there was a high risk that if I continue at the Biocenter, that I would not get a group leader or professor position at the academics afterwards. But I knew that only at this position I could make a unique contribution. So that was a trade-off with, I've not been sure, I'm doing the right thing or a good thing. But the bad advice would have been possibly to go to somewhere else, to something very different. And the good advice was just stay where you are and do this unique contribution. If you're sure that what you're doing is unique worldwide and no one else can do it, you just punch through and you follow this path. Okay. And that was a very difficult device because it was against the stream.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned previously that you took your father's car in a sleeping bag and drove around to think about what you wanted to do. Is there a way that you manage your mindset? Because sometimes there's a lot going on. There's, people get stressed out, or there's critical decisions to make. Besides yoga, which we discussed, is there another tool that you use to kind of maintain your sanity?
I think fishing.
Still?
No, not anymore. I stopped
okay.
it. But what you learn in fishing is not to think.
Yeah.
You're so full, and I think it's like if you really push or something and you want to have it and you don't loosen your thoughts about it, you don't get new ideas. Right. I think sometimes you have to step back some steps, relax, and then you see the problem which you are targeting, or you see it much clearer. Yeah. And this is what a good thing. So driving around with a car, my father, and having not much money at that time, but a cool car and a sleeping bag and sleeping wherever. I think I've been sleeping between cows I don't know, whatever. But that was just taking myself off and off of this normal path and try to relax and seeing myself also not. Try to relax, to get a little bit distant from the problems, and then you gain creativity again. Yeah. And I think if you want too strong something, possibly you block yourself.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, stepping off, doing something totally different, which is completely away from the problem. Usually halfway through whatever I'm doing, I'm like, yeah, right, that's the solution for that. Yeah. I want to bring it back to today, because I don't think we can leave before we talk about Roche. Oh. And I mean, whatever you can speak about. What are you collaborating on with Roche right now?
Scientifically, or
I do whatever else you're doing. I don't know.
Well, we established.
I would imagine it's science, but I don't know what else.
Well, because I'm doing also this overreaching initiatives. What we established is a very new concept of how academics with industry works together. Okay. Yeah, so far, there was mainly that Roche or pharma companies give some money to the academics and they for a postdoc or a research project. And it was kind of frustrating for this industry to see what, after 3-4 years, the outcome. And the wish was to contribute more and to participate more in the research. And from their point of view, of course, they learn more how we do it. This was not bad, but we would learn also more about they need and how they think. And this is very important. If you want to do medical translation or translational projects, you want to get in the driver's seat, you have to learn how the best partners in the world think about their problems and how they target their problems. And they, of course, want to learn from master academics. So we put up a joint PhD and postdoctoral program where PhD students are working at Roche and at our place, and postdocs at Roche and our place to target teams or problems in therapeutics and diagnostics, which we have, which we together define. Yeah, okay. That's a very good learning. So it's a new generation of students and scientists coming. They will have a much better understanding and how to work in both fields. And for them, it's very good because they can position themselves better in whether they want to work in industry later on or in academics. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's always the thought that the academics think, oh, we give away the best people. It's not true. We find for the best people the best locations.
Yeah. Yeah. Every person in their right position, I think. Okay. I think we're going to get to the mentorship minute now, but before I do, I want to ask, is there anything that I should have asked you and I didn't, or anything else you'd like to discuss?
Oh, we talked a lot. I think we could go on for some more hours.
I think so. Okay, well then, in terms of the mentorship minute, what we like to do here is just a little bit of advice for yourself when you were 20 or when you finished the PhD, those pivotal moments in your career. I usually say what mine is that I only figured out later that nobody knew what they were doing. And I thought everybody else really was way ahead of me and had life figured out. And I just didn't. And it's usually the advice I give to the younger people is don't worry. People, they don't know what they're doing either. So don't get too stressed out about it. That's kind of my mantra still today. What about yourself?
Well, it's the same. It goes in a similar direction. I think what I always do is, still today, is I try to listen to as many as possible people and to get their opinions and to learn what they are concerned about, what they are working on, what are their challenges they are targeting, and just to learn, always to learn and to expand my horizon as far as I can do. And from that, I then take some issues may turn out to, or some information may turn out not to be important for me. But I don't know how it works in consciousness or how it works, but I put then the parts together, so it gives for me a new perspective and to go into a certain direction. That was the same as a young person, that I had to develop to look for the way where I want to go along. And it's not like one advice and then you go, because right. Everyone gives you a different advice, and your life is very dynamic, and depending on the situation in life you need very different advices. So it's a complex situation. So one should be aware that this is a complex situation. It's nothing unusual, but also have some trust that you can find the right way by talking with many people and getting different perspectives, and then finding also. And having trust in that you find the way. So there's no one. If there's a one advice, listen to yourself and try to really do your heart and try to find where you want to go, and then you will find this way to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Daniel, thanks so much for being here today. Where should people check out your work? Is there any place we should be looking in particular? If people are interested in...
Or at the website ETH Zurich, you can find me, and there's some information.
Okay.
If you're interested, you can contact me anytime. So I'm happy to have a coffee.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you too. Thanks for having me here. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Lab, where we dissect life science success stories. If you enjoyed that, please check us out and follow on Spotify under Leadership Lab. If you don't want to miss any episodes, be sure to follow Headcount on LinkedIn or subscribe to the Headcount YouTube channel. And as always, we thank Headcount for making this possible. If you don't want to miss out on any of the latest job opportunities in the life sciences industry, please check out the newest roles on headcount.ch.